Now, please join me in welcoming your MC back, Steve Horton, Ideas Director of Product Portfolio Management.
Good morning, everybody. Did everybody have a good time last night? I know I did. Anyways, it kind of seemed like a wedding. We had the mamba line going. Did they do the chicken dance? No? I don't know. Anyways, it was a great night, and we're going to have a great day today. We have a real cool and exciting morning for you guys, and then some great breakout sessions. Don't forget to tweet. I think, what are we up to, about 8,000 tweets? No? 8? 80? Come on, tweet away. And don't forget to get your passports stamped and all that. Anyway, I'm tired this morning, so I'm going to just get right to the good stuff here. And we're going to welcome back Tim Sanders from 2008 Forum. If anybody was there, I'm sure you enjoyed his book. I think he's had the book that time too. And of course, Tim was at ground zero during the dot-com crash when he was Chief Solutions Officer for Yahoo. He's a very well-known author and speaker, best-selling leadership coach, and former, again, Yahoo executive. Please welcome Tim Sanders.
Thank you very much. That is great warm-up music. And I told you before I went on that when I moved to Los Angeles, my wife and I bought Duff McKagan's old house, the old Guns N' Roses mansion, which means that we had a bunch of weird people knocking on our doors for the first 2 years. And a great relationship with a lot of contractors over the course of time, because you can imagine those guys didn't know how to take care of anything, let alone themselves. So, before I start, I just want to say with sincerity and enthusiasm that I appreciate you having me back. I really do, because the more you talk to the same group, the more you know a group's challenges and issues, and the more you actually have a chance to give a speech that makes a difference. And I don't know if I said this last time. I know I did not say the word electronic once. I do remember that distinctly. But last time I talked about this book, and we can turn this down a little bit. Last time I talked about a book that I read years ago that completely changed the way I thought about making presentations or giving speeches or doing what I do. And if there's one book you ever read about making a presentation in public that will change the way you do it, the book is called Working the Room. Working the Room is a book by speechwriter wonderkind Nick Morgan. He runs a very popular blog about presentations called publicwords.com. In the book, he says, as he has coached me, the following: the only reason to give a speech is to change the world. He says this is the prevailing point of view that drove the best speakers we've ever heard. Whether you're talking about Martin Luther King Jr., JFK Jr., Steve Jobs Sr., there's an appetite for takeaway value, not storytelling values. Sure, stories are a great device, jokes are a great device, but when I speak to you today, I'm really, really passionate about giving you 3 ideas to bounce back. And when I say bounce back, I don't just mean bouncing back from economic cycles. I think it goes deeper than that. I'm talking about bouncing back from a change in the playing field, whatever it is. Price, platform, customer value. It just seems like about the time we get our business model and our concept going, it's like, as Yogi Berra would say, deja vu all over again. There's just some change that requires us to let go of the peanuts, run really fast, get leaner all over again, and execute. I, in my life, have seen this crisis absolutely hit organizations that you would have thought were ready for this. My first job out of graduate school, besides a painfully short, and I mean short stint as an assistant to Ed Deming in the mid-'80s, which I could do a whole keynote on how not to take a job when it looks like a good one. But my first actual job out of graduate school was working with dealer distribution at Southwestern Bell Mobile Systems at the birth of cell phones. The artist formerly known as trunk phones, or IMTF. So my job was to work with dealers and distributors across North America to locate the right equipment at the right price and the right place and all that stuff with the crude technology we had in the mid-'80s. So anyway, and I'm using an example here. I know it's not an analog to your industry, but I think I'll illustrate something by talking about this. So at the time, like 1987, 1988, do you remember the state of the cell phone business at the time? I mean, you want to talk about heavy and expensive. That's a time when a mobile phone, as you know it today, was installed into your car. There was an antenna installed onto the top of your car. The phones hardly worked. You literally had to go find a tower and park out in front of it to get reception. And then if you were going to have a mobile phone that you carried around, you needed a weight belt. Because these phones weighed around 20 to 30 pounds. I tell kids this, they go, shut up. No, I'm serious. When the B2000 came out that was only the size of a Nike sneaker, that was like showing fire to cavemen when we first showed. No, mobile phones were in briefcases. Remember those Halliburton briefcases that had these huge battery packs in them? So anyway, the Cadillac of phones for the 80s was Oki Data. The Oki 900 was the best phone. Not only was it beautiful in terms of its design, it had very low defect, incredibly high customer satisfaction. They marketed, I don't believe this now that I understand much more about this technology, they marketed it, got better reception, and of course, like most customers would always do if there's good marketing, they believed it. But the Oki was the thing to have. It was about $3,000 for the phone to have installed in your car and around $5,000 on a waiting list to get the briefcase. I'm seriously not kidding. That's really what the price points were. So then something happened, though, to the entire business concept of cellular phones in the United States. It was the 1990-91 recession. Crushed the model. Because what it did, as all these recessions do, is it reset the playing field, and all of a sudden price actually became an issue, not in just terms of the minutes. That's where off-peak came from, the whole idea of evenings and weekends free. That was birthed in 1990 and 91 in response to it. But eventually what happens by 1992, 1993, phones became free. I'm serious. If you activated a phone with Southwestern Bell Mobile or Metrocell or all those different companies and agreed to 2 years, the phone cost you $0, except for the most expensive types like Oki Data, which were still, because of their cost structure, a couple of $1,000s at this point. Oki Data, and Oki at the time, even though they had quality down pat, and they were early on in total quality management, what they didn't have down pat was trust in their distribution and sales channels. The way they distributed information to the outside world was something that the CIA could have modeled their operations after. So Oki Data wasn't slow. Oki Data had so much secrecy, there was no way flowing through our distribution channels. They had a chance to compete with these upstarts like Novatel, which was an awful phone, but it became the leading market share, or the rise of AudioVox, or the big comeback of Motorola. And what happened was, by about 1995, Oki has to exit pretty much the market entirely and resort to where they thought the new gold rush would be, and that was printers and cartridges, taking on a little company called Hewlett-Packard and their friends Epson, and you see how that worked for Oki Data. Not letting go of the information just killed them. A lot of people that write the tales from the corporate crypt about what happened to them also said there was a huge execution issue. Not because they didn't have execution as a style in Japan, but because if you don't let go of information throughout your value chain, you can't get stuff done. Now, one of the companies I brought to North America I was so excited about is I think it's the one thing I still think about from the late 80s that really gives me a lot of excitement, was I saw a military phone in 1986 called the Mobira, M-O-B-I-R-A. It was looked like something out of MASH. It was small. It was a fourth the size of the briefcase phones. It was made by a company in Scandinavia, out of Helsinki, Finland, called Nokia. Nokia was really a wiring company mostly. They also dabbled a little bit in water and consumer electronics and a variety of other things. But this Nokia Mobile was really exciting because it worked better, it was smaller, and they were an incredibly interesting group to work with. Incredibly open in terms of information flow. By the mid-90s, Nokia had come in and backfilled everyone, and for about a decade, Nokia dominated. By 2005, when I went to Helsinki to speak at one of their conferences like this, Symbian had, and I kid you not, 70% market share worldwide as an operating system. It looked like there was no way they're going to lose this game. The Nokia N95 was breathtaking. It had almost 200 megs of storage on the phone just for music. It had buttons on screen you could touch, not swipeable touch screen, but it really was a leap forward. It took them 4 years to get that product from concept to market. There's a lot of internal politics at Nokia. There's a lot of distrust of the North American partners they had. We worked through it, but when 2006 and 2007 revolutions happened, whether it's the Motorola Razr or the Apple iPhone, Nokia wasn't able to bounce back. The whole concept of swipeable touch screens for them was a deal killer, because they didn't have a culture to do fast prototyping and iteration, like what you would read about in this fantastic new book I recommend called The Lean Startup. The Lean Startup by Eric Ries really documents what happened to Nokia. You can't move fast if your information channels don't move fast. And I'll talk about this later. You can't move fast if every one of your business planning meetings operates like a G20 meeting we saw this weekend, where they have meetings to talk about no more meetings, right? So I want to talk today about what it takes to be a resilient organization in the face of dramatic change. Because when I think about this talk today, I think of it as more or less a coming-of-age story that all of us have to think about and all of us have to live through, that change always happens, and that if you think about it correctly, change is actually an opportunity. And I don't mean this in some whamby-pamby political sense. I mean, if you look at the numbers, change is the level setter. It is the great equalizer. If you want to read an article that's really compelling in this nature, you can Google, which I got over, you know, that means to search online. Yahoo means to walk away from $45 billion. Okay. If you Google the phrase hanging tough and then New Yorker, just those 4 words, hanging tough New Yorker, you'll get an article. And the article is a review of a study by a leading consulting company called Bain. And Bain reviewed every recession since 1901, and what they zeroed in on was the idea that all the great leaps happen at the bottom, not the top. Or as my old boss Mark Cuban likes to say, everybody is a genius during a bull market. What Bain found out is that at the bottom of a market, when the fear and the panic levels are at their highest, innovation stops in about 98% of all businesses. What was interesting, though, is when they looked at the 2% of the businesses that created what Napoleon Hill would call a mastermind group, shutting down all the fast food media of the world and firing all the Chicken Littles that worked at their company, and really focusing on technical information so that they can move forward while their competitors were frozen with that deer in the headlines look you see during times like this. For example, what they studied is what happened in 1932. What happened in 1932 was a little company out of Battle Creek, Michigan, called Kellogg's, who'd fought really hard to be like third, you know, sort of like where Yahoo is right now in the search business. They had this opportunity to leapfrog over the monster called Post. They launched Rice Krispies in 1932 because they knew they had what we would now call a blue ocean strategy to put a product to market when their competitors were worried more about keeping the doors open. 1937, the brand Chevrolet is introduced for the same exact reasons, and over again in history we see there are some companies that are the phoenix and there are some companies that are the fodder. Think about this. The iMac II comes out in 84, 86, that zone, right during the recovery of a major recession. Think about when the iPod came out. The iPod came out in September of 2011. That wasn't by accident. Steve Jobs had that thing ready to go from 1998, but the timing wasn't right, he said, because he would get crushed by Sony, who had the Walkman institution that seemed insurmountable, but he knew they're a big old slow company, and if he released it during the height of the panic, he'd have a couple of years. did it again with the iPad release in 2009, just like Hyundai did in 2009 when they made the greatest leap in history of a car company in market share by buying GM's canceled advertising spots for 18 cents on the dollar. I could go on, the article's great, but what it suggests is that change can be a good thing if you are an enterprise that is of execution and you can perfect your information. So I want to talk about two aspirations that I believe impact everyone in here in your entire industry. From electrical manufacturers to distributors to solution providers, there's really two things to aspire to as a leadership style and as a process management style that absolutely make you future-proof. By the way, if you want to tweet anything, again, the hashtag for the event, which is used to make people that don't come here jealous, that's really the fundamental use of Twitter at an event like this. We want to spread out some of these tweetable messages, is hashtag EBISForum. I am at Sanders Says, because apparently there's some 17-year-old named Tim Sanders that beat me to the punch. Okay, so the first thing I want to talk about is this concept of what does it take to be an information master. I think in your industry, this is so important. The question, can you leverage customer, channel, and value chain data, turn it into actionable knowledge, and create insight that gives you a sustainable competitive advantage? That's what it means to be an information master. A friend of mine, John McKean, wrote a well-researched, snarky book a couple of years ago called Information Masters, where he talked to 1,000 different companies over 15 years of his research, representing almost every industry, including yours. And what he isolated was the DNA of an information master. For example, if I'm just going to pick one out of the sky that I hope doesn't make anyone cringe, that Walmart, for example, is an information master that absolutely beat their competitors like Sears and Roebuck, et cetera, who are based on the, yearly catalog model, by almost perfecting their supply chain information. I tell my son this. He works at Apple. He's been there for several years. I explained to him that only in the last 10 years, as Walmart fought to earn their P&E ratio, did they get their low price advantage through negotiations. In the beginning, their low price advantage was a fundamental outpouring of the information mastery that they had achieved by taking a different approach than their competitors. Same thing for Google. At the inflection point, when Google took half of our search market, which happened in less than a year, by the way, they had, by best estimates, 1/16th, do the math, 1/16th the equipment we did. Their entire data center could have fit in this room 12 times or more. We had an army of data centers, and what they proved is what John McKean realized. Becoming an information master is a leadership issue. It's a talent management issue. It is a cultural issue. What he did is he took a look at budgets and time. And in the research, he made a whoppingly cool discovery that the average organization that's trying to get this information piece of the puzzle right puts about 92% of everything against what? Capture, store, and try to glean something out of information and all the technology that surrounds it, from hardware to software to services. Now, I'll make this point for my friends in the room in the solution space. Keeping abreast of technology and information development is absolutely necessary, but there is so much you can do above the fold. What he learned in his research, that a 2% investment in getting the right people on the bus, creating an environment that is engaging and teaching them what Larry Bossidy would be called stone cold execution, that had almost as much impact as the other 92%. Combine that with a 1% investment in creating a culture, which is a conversation. If you want to tweet something, you can tweet that culture is a conversation about how things are done around here. That has an impact. And a 1% investment in succession and leadership, in other words, bench strength. When you add that together, a mere 4% of the budget was driving 50% of the result. And it totally explains the opportunity I'm going to dial in today. So information mastery, then, is in your hands. It's not a checkbook issue. It's not a financial issue. It's an innovation issue. And it's an innovation issue around what I consider the heart and soul of any business today, and that's people. One of the coolest things I read in this book, The Lean Startup, and later I'll give you my email address for a book list of everything I talk about today. Eric Ries says, metrics are people. That's why it's so important to actually talk to your customers instead of just reading about your customers in data format. And people are the engine of every company, not contracts, not concepts, not even processes. It's really all about your people. So this is the first thing to think about. How do we as an organization become, in this environment, an information master, which is totally possible.